Good evening. I'd like to call to order the council meeting of August 5th. If the clerk could please read the roll.
Councilmember Wood,
Here.
Councilmember Spatafor, Councilmember Spitzley, Councilmember Washington, Councilmember Hussein, Councilmember Dunbar, Councilmember Garza, Councilmember Jackson.
Before I move to the minutes, if we could just take a moment for reflection. I think we're all aware of the tragedies and the things that happened this weekend and the number of people that were senselessly murdered and those that were injured. Normally, this is something, when we do a moment of meditation, that's done at the council meeting, but we won't have a council meeting until the 12th. So I would like us as a body at this point to just take a moment for the audience as well, if we could just reflect and think of those lives and the people and the tragedy that they're dealing with at this time. Thank you. Thank you very much. That takes us on to the minutes of July 29th. Vice President Spatafor.
Madam President, I move the adoption of the minutes from the Committee of the Whole meeting from July 29th, 2019.
We have a motion. Are there any questions or concerns? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. This is an opportunity for public comment. There are a number of items on the agenda tonight, so this is your time to speak to any and all of those. Again, we have the police department that Daryl Green, our interim police chief, who's here to talk and give us a future update. We have the ranked choice voting that we will have a presentation on. The Board of Water and Light will give us an update on the stump removals. And then we have Brian McGreen, the Director of Economic Development and Planning, that will talk about code compliance. So if any of these issues, if you would like to address the council, please come up to the podium, give us your name for the record, and this is your opportunity for your 3 minutes. Is there anyone that would like to come forward at this time? Okay, thank you. That takes us into our presentations. We want to welcome the interim police chief, Daryl Green, here with us this evening. And we had asked him to come. He's going to start doing some visitations in the neighborhoods for the next few weeks and talking to the public. He also has a meeting before the Board of Police Commissioners. The mayor has recommended interim chief Green to be the new acting chief, and waiting for the Board of Police Commissioners to also concur with that. And so we asked if he could come forward and talk to us a little bit about his vision and the things with the department. And so we'd like to turn it over to the interim chief. And if you would make sure that the green light is on and pull it close to you so that we can hear you. We'll now turn it over to you, and if council members have questions while he's addressing us, we'll take a moment to stop and answer those questions. Congratulations and welcome.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Greatly appreciated for the honor to step before the council and say a few words. I will clarify that as far as me coming to the table with brand new initiatives, I think that would be a little premature for me to do so. I would like to say that I'm in the data collection phase. There are a lot of different nuances when it comes to the police chief position. But certainly I have had the experience. I've supervised as a captain for the last 7 years all of the 4 major police divisions, but I've never supervised all of them at one time. But certainly I've had experience as a patrol captain administrative services captain, staff services captain, and also the Detective Bureau Investigations Division as well. So I have fulfilled the full gamut of responsibility for the police department, with the exception of the Office of Chief Police. So to give those initiatives right now, I think is a little premature. And also the second piece to that is the 20th, the Board of Commissioners will either approve or deny my acceptance as the acting chief. And so for the sake of my men and women and our men and women of the Lansing Police Department, I think it would be best for me to just talk a little bit about philosophy
That
and
would
not
be
about
great.
specific initiatives. And just talking a little bit, excuse me, ma'am.
Yeah. Yes, and I think you need to pull your mic a little bit closer to you as well.
Thank you, Madam President. I just want a clarification. On the 20th, are you going to be chief, or are you going to be acting chief? Because you said acting chief,
No.
and you said acting chief. So on the 20th, are they going to officially make you chief, and right now you're interim chief, or are you going to be acting chief? When they do, what action are they taking on the 20th?
Well, the action they're taking specifically is approval of the mayor's recommendation for me to be the permanent chief.
Okay, that's what I was.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you. Go ahead.
So just to talk a little bit about philosophy, and for the sake of the audience that may have not heard me before, what I was trying to articulate is that I think it would be somewhat premature for me to discuss changes and initiatives without securing the actual job as permanent chief. And also, I've been on the job as acting interim chief since Thursday. So I am in the
Enough time?
So I am essentially in the data collection phase of this, and what I was saying also is that there's certain nuances of the job as police chief, and I have commanded all of the 4 major divisions of the police department: patrol division, the detective bureau, staff services, administrative services. So I've had the experience of the full gamut of the police department, with the exception of the chief of police, officer of internal affairs as well. And so for me, I'm just talking philosophy. You know, I firmly and strongly believe that as a police department and as a city, we should be really good and proficient at expecting our officers to guarantee the constitutional rights of our citizens and community members. And also, we must be and perform at the highest level when it comes to public safety, which is a key mission of the police department, public safety. So for me, I'm looking at assessments of how we do business. First and foremost, how do we man and staff our police department? How do we train them? And also, how do we deploy them? Are we making correct assessments? Are we doing audits about the efficiencies and effectiveness of our police department on a host of different variables, budget-wise? You know, are we performing on the street, on the ground like we should? Are we embracing the best practices and procedures? So I'm looking at a lot of that stuff right now. And again, it's a lot to look at to make a full assessment before making a change. But the second variable for me in my philosophy has always been trust building. I believe as a police department, we must engage these high trust relationships with all communities. Diversity is embraced, inclusiveness, all of those things to maintain our legitimacy as a police department. We have to do that. And certainly, we will have challenges from time to time, and part of my responsibility as a result of the most recent challenge is to conduct an internal review board. And we're already processing that, putting that forth. We'll have a collection, a staffing of captains and lieutenants and sergeants and police officers, all looking at how we can mitigate situations that occurred on the 14th of June. So we're working on that, and certainly I've been with former Chief Yankowski along the way as he made his final decision on that. But building those bridges between community and policing is of utmost importance to me. and also the partnership piece, partnering with community members, partnering with other agencies, that collaboration piece. I think we do an excellent job at the Lansing Police Department, and I certainly would echo from others that Chief Yankowski has put us in a good position. He's certainly put me in a good position if appointed as the permanent police chief. But certainly we can strengthen that relationship with our neighboring, bordering cities and counties and so forth. So that's definitely on my agenda. Creating those synergies, those collaborations with other entities is necessary for us all to be successful, because guess what? Criminals don't see borders. They go where there's opportunity at. So we have to be in a situation where we're engaging and collecting ourselves with other entities throughout the city, county, state, and also on the federal lines. We have some great partners in law enforcement with Michigan State Police, Eaton County, Ingham County, so forth, our federal partners, DEA, FBI, ATF. We're all trying to create this situation whereas if one community benefits from crime reductions, we know that it will most likely have a positive effect on the community that borders it. So my success and Eaton County's success and Ingham County's success is all of our success when it comes to the city of Lansing. So just trying to build on that. And finally, always improving as a police department. And what I loved about Chief Yankowski, he always looked for out-of-the-box ideas. He went, he researched national best practices and policies and procedures, all to make this city and this department a better entity. So for me, being able to discern and really sink your teeth into some really good research will be beneficial to us all. We have, to go back to partners, we have a number of partners, former professors of mine that I'm great partners with out of Michigan State University, using some of their talent, bringing it to Lansing. We're already looking at some partnerships with Michigan State University. Hopefully we get one of the 2 grants that we applied for, reference the south side of Lansing. But just trying to connect as many entities as I can for the department to make us all better. And so that would conclude my philosophy. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Are there questions yes, Councilmember Jackson?
Thank you, Chief Green, for being here. And you know I'm a big fan of you and have been for many years now, ever since I've seen you work when I was an assistant city attorney. My question is do you think there are members in the community who are afraid to make police reports, internal police complaints to the police office about police officers? And if you do you have any plan to maybe rectify that?
First of all, thank you very much for the question, and that is truly a important question because certainly we want to create the environment where people feel comfortable to push feedback about officers, our department, back to us so we can make changes, make assessments, and so forth. So the police-community relationship is very fragile. It's something that we have to continue to build to make it stronger. I do like the fact that we have a commissioned investigator that also works with the city, and I think that's an avenue that I've certainly used in the past from my own personal experiences with different complaints, push those through to the complaint investigator commission over at Human Relations, and we've had some success with that. But I think the dialogue has to continue between myself, all of our police officers, all of our command staff as well. I think if we have more dialogue, and one of Chief Yankowski's recommendations before he left was to have quarterly public forums. Now, I don't know exactly what that's going to look like, but I think that anytime we get an opportunity as a police department to have dialogue with our community members, most of the time it's rather positive. But unfortunately, we have those occurrences where people, as you say, may have fear to come forward with information. But we do have some avenues that they can come forward anonymously, And certainly they can come forth over to the Complaint Commissioner Investigator's Office over at Human Relations as well. So thank you for that question.
Other questions? Councilmember Hussein, then Councilmember Garza.
I'm glad you referenced the citizen investigator. So we know that the charter vests authority essentially for all citizens' complaints with the Police Board of Commissioners. And incredibly, I think, important to that process is the complaint committee, but also the investigator that reports to that complaint committee. The individual in that position is doing a fine job, but they have been on contract for a number of years. Are we going to make that, should you be the police chief, which I really, really hope you are moving forward, but are we going to make that a priority to actually get that position posted and hired?
As far as I'm concerned, I would definitely support that position. Bernard Brantley is a great colleague. He did a great job, and I understand he's on the contract at this point. But I really believe that that position needs to be filled as soon as possible, so we don't have as many of those type of issues where people are afraid to come forth. So I would definitely do everything I can do to move that forward as soon as possible.
Councilmember Garza, then Councilmember Washington.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you for being here tonight, Captain Green, future soon-to-be Chief of Police. Now, when you say the community and the police department has a fragile relationship right now, you know, what you're doing with a community police officer, policing is great. And I know that there's one just put in Walnut, the Walnut neighborhood. Is that something that you might look at? Because I know the second ward, and I've been asking Chief Yankowski a while about trying to get a community police officer in the second ward, and it encompasses just a small portion, you know, a fraction of the second ward. Would that be something you would be looking into in the future of trying to get a community police officer in the second ward?
So exactly what you're talking about is one of those nuances. So I know that the chief made that decision, and I didn't have all the information to refute why he made that decision or not. And so that's what I'm collecting, making sure that I make the right decision on that issue. Now, I know where you're at is largely a business, large apartment complex area. Is that what we're talking? Okay. So those particular areas, when I say fragile, and when I say the police-community relationship, I'm talking about on a national level. So what happens in Dallas or Dayton or El Paso has an effect on the city of Lansing. So, with the adaptation of public media, television, so forth, what happens in those different areas has an effect on us. So for me, when I use that term fragile, I'm thinking generally. I would conclude and I'll clarify that I think the Lansing Police Department has a great relationship with its community. Doesn't mean we need to stop. Doesn't mean that I don't want more community police officers. But however, I understand that policing resources are just that. They're resources, and there's limitations on those resources. So being able to make an assessment on what the call load is, what issues are in the area, other alternatives to that. Those are some of the things I would definitely take an assessment of, but it wouldn't be an easy decision, to be completely honest with you. But I'm a firm believer of community policing. I think that was the pivotal point in my career. I thought I was only going to be a police officer for a few years until I became a community police officer over the Leroy Fro housing complex on Pleasant Grove and Rio, and it was there that I started seeing some of the systemic issues. Children going to school at 20-degree temperatures without coats, eating potato chips and cookies, going to school. I saw a lot of those issues, the homelessness, the chronic mental health issues, the substance abuse. I dealt with all those issues, and I understand the importance of collecting and connecting resources in our community with other city resources. So the partnerships are just not for other agencies. It's the ability to be able to connect with housing and human relations and so forth to seriously help people. So one of the things for me has always been to try to put a dent in systemic issues that many of us deal with in policing that maybe aren't necessarily all police positions, police tasking, but those systemic issues really drive our resources. And so if I take a officer off of the patrol list, somehow I'm gonna have to figure out a way to replace his or her duties to put him or her in a community policing responsibility. But I do think there's an opportunity to fully look at that, and maybe we can get it done. But I would certainly have, I would think, some good rationale for doing so or not doing so to you.
Well, thank you for that answer. I appreciate that, and I will be advocating next budget for some more police officers for you. So, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Washington, then Councilmember Spitzley.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you, Chief Green. I too want to speak about the community policing officers. They have made a huge difference in some of the neighborhoods I represent. Crime dropped dramatically in the Baker-Denora neighborhood when we got Officer Whitsett there for being a community policing officer. We've had some tremendous success in Northtown neighborhood. We've had, I'm glad Old Town is getting one now. I hope that this guy, woman, whomever, will be able to make their way down through Old Town and not just be at the Walnut area. But my concern is this. I represent the Potter Walsh neighborhood. I was there immediately when I found out about what happened on June 14th. I was working with Dr. Stan Parker and some of the other people. And I truly believe if we had our CPO there, that so much of this could have been de-escalated at the time. But what the problem is if they're on medical leave, if they're in training, they're not there. And they're not replaced. They could be gone 6 to 12 months and they are not replaced. And they are constantly being called out of these challenged neighborhoods because we don't have enough officers on the road. We've got to do something about this because I truly believe that would not have happened if we'd have had a full-time on-site CPO in that neighborhood. So I'm hoping as you go forward with this that we will be cognizant of that, try to find a way to not have these folks pulled out of the neighborhood so much. And if we need more officers, for crying out loud, ask for them. And I also think we can use, as we see our mental health system breaking down and being defunded, we probably could use another social worker too. So I'm really hoping that as you go through the budget, because I'm pretty confident you're gonna be the chief with us for quite some time, I'm hoping. And we need to get these positions in place so that we can have those relationships and it will really lessen the incidents.
Thank you. Councilmember Spitzley.
Thank you, Madam President. So, whenever Chief Yankowski had come before the budget, he's always been very graceful about when we ask him, we're kind of point blank direct. When we ask him, do you have enough officers on staff? He's always very graceful, and he talks about, how his officers are doing a great job, and we know that. And so what I think we're trying to convey, what I'm trying to convey is that, we recognize that, while you try to be graceful, but, that there is a need for additional officers. At least in my mind, the community police officers, I think, are critical. And when we talk about folks who are don't feel comfortable coming forth, I think when you have an officer embedded in the community and they're working with that officer on a daily basis and see that they are human like everyone else, I think it lends to people feeling more comfortable if they see issues. There's always going to be issues, but I think it helps. As for what's happening, across the country and nationally, if you could you speak just a few words on, what the LPD is doing to be prepared or, think about some of those things? Because we live in a time, unfortunately, where it could happen anywhere. And I think that just having you speak on a few, if you can, where the Lansing Police Department is in way of readiness.
So when you talk about active shooter preparedness, we actually have some very high knowledge in active shooter preparedness. I actually wrote my doctoral dissertation on active shooter preparedness. But it's the men and women that really focus in that area in the department that I think are true experts, not me, some person just writing a dissertation, but trying to learn as much as I can. But I think we have done a good job, and again, back to Chief Yankowski, he's put us in a great position. We've been doing active shooter preparedness training for over 10 years. We're well aware of it. We have a very agile police department. We've made some changes with our weaponry throughout the years. We've always been on the, I guess, ahead of the curve when it came to preparedness for active shooter incidents and so forth. And my actual dissertation was I looked at all police departments throughout this area. So it gave us an opportunity back in 2012 and 2013 to really see what county police departments were doing, what other cities' police departments that were in the area, because when you have a large-scale incident, you may need other police departments to get here and help. And so we've been training actively throughout the Tri-County area on this, and we embrace different technology. And I won't necessarily go into details, but I think we're in a very high state of readiness, but it's still an issue that concerns us all. We definitely make sure our officers are always have that awareness, our detectives. That's why you see people in plain clothes walking around with handguns and so forth when they're working. So we've taken some good steps, but certainly we'll do an after-action review of Dayton and El Paso. We did the same thing for Las Vegas. So we look at all of these different incidents and we learn from them, lessons learned. And we try to create the situation whereas we can mitigate some of those situations in the city of Lansing. But we have key people that are researching that right now, that are watching video with a critical eye to see what they did and what they did not do. But I definitely think our men and women here at the Lansing Police Department perform at a high level. We've been to training throughout the country. Several of us graduated from the FBI National Academy. Many of us have really spent and focused all of our attention, and for some of them, their entire lives in learning about preparedness on a whole different level. We've also connected with our fire department on some of these issues to deal with the aftermath, for medical treatment. We've also embraced our advocacy programs, our victim advocacies for trauma issues and connected with community mental health on those issues. So we've tried to put ourselves in a situation whereas we can mitigate as much as we can. But it always saddens us, and we're always worried that it could happen to us, but we want to make sure we're prepared at least the best we can. So thank you.
Are there other questions? Councilmember Hussein.
Just one last question for me, I promise. I really appreciate the comments from my colleagues, and I think I heard maybe some questions within. In terms of, we have talked about this as part of council as long as I've been part of this body, in terms of making sure we actually all are running, and will run on ensuring that police have the tools that they need to keep our community safe. And so the best way we can do that is obviously ask command. What is it that you all need? And then obviously have conversations with those frontline workers. When we talk about the way we police our community, I appreciate the hotspot policing, that's predictive policing. I appreciate the community policing division. That's a little bit, that's proactive, but I think mostly what we're doing is reactive. So we have the rapid response to calls for service. We have the retrospective investigations. We have can you identify maybe some things that police departments do that are truly proactive that maybe we're not doing, and what it would take for us to get there, to truly being a proactive department?
Well, I'll say this, and I give credit to the men and women that work for our Violent Crime Initiative, and not going into details about that, but they're working around the clock. You know, one of the things that the research says is we have to be focused, because when it comes to violent crime specifically, less than almost 0.5%, less than 1% of the population in our city, they cause over 95% of the violent crime in our city. So our violent crime initiative, our patrol sectors, when they do problem solving, they're really focusing their efforts on, criminals that continue to engage in violent behaviors. So behind the scenes, we're doing a lot of that stuff. And unfortunately, what happens is the public only hears about the arrests, or maybe you don't hear about the arrests. But we are very proactive on that end. And part of our proactivity is our partnerships. Michigan State Police are right in operations. They work out of that office. FBI is right in operations. They work out of that office. ATF, right out of that office. So we have built, our police department around being proactive. We have those communications with Eaton County, and Ingham County about issues, people that commit crimes in their area that are also back and forth over into our borders doing the same thing. So I would say we're very proactive. We do the best that we can with the resources we have. We embrace technology to further substantiate and improve in our deployment of resources. So we're doing our best to be proactive. However, we also have the call load. We also have continuous calls going out, and one of the things I do want to look at is deployment of police officers. Now, when we talk about removing a patrol officer from a shift, we have to figure out the best way to also handle the calls as we move that body. So it becomes particularly keen that we look at how are we deploying our officers, in what capacity. Some of the things we do, some of the reports our officers are taking, they drive all the way across town just to show a friendly face, when a lot of those reports they can be doing over the telephone. They could be saving a lot of time, and they could be using that time spent driving across town, taking the report, driving back, writing the report. They could be spending a lot of that time being proactive, really engaging the community in positive ways, connecting with youth, connecting with our elderly, making them feel safe and so forth. So looking at how we deploy our resources on those calls that come into the 911 dispatch center is something I definitely want to look at. And, hopefully we can embrace the technology and we can improve on our responses while also being able to move some bodies over to community policing and still remain proactive as well.
Okay.
And I would I just follow up by saying we're in total agreement that I believe your officers do the absolute best that you and they can do with the resources that you have at your disposal. I just hope that in subsequent conversations, post-August 20th, that we can have very candid conversations between the council and yourself so that we can help you to procure additional resources so that you're not limited in any manner. Thank you.
Vice President Spatafor.
Thank you, Madam President. Chief, thanks for being here tonight. I don't have a question, but I just wanted to say thank you. I appreciate you being here tonight. And also, I really respect your answer to some of the first questions about waiting and see and looking at the data and really diving in and getting to know the department from a different role than you've been in since 1997. You've been everywhere, but this is a new role for you, and I appreciate the data-driven approach and the thoughtfulness with which you answered those questions. So I'm looking forward to working with you, and acting chief, interim chief, it's one too many words for my taste, so hopefully the commission makes the right choice.
Great, thank you. I have a few things I wanted to go over as I was taking notes as people were talking. I want to first go back to the citizen investigator. That position you have, the Board of Commissioners has been looking at for a year. A year is too long. I know you know that. You know, it was writing a job description, it was doing the posting, it was doing all of those things. This is an ordinance, so that position is required to be there. And I think having somebody get into that position will also help with the communication that you were talking about in the community and that Councilmember Jackson was talking about. That person needs to be a face that's out there on a regular basis. I appreciate Bernard Brantley, but I will tell you, you know, he's not been at neighborhood meetings, he's not been at some of those things, and I think having that, you know, presence out there would help when people don't feel necessarily comfortable coming to IA to make those complaints. So I hope that's, you know, as you said, that's something that you want to look at. So that's my 2 cents on that. The Board of Commissioners, and it's something that I've talked about over and over again, and I hope as chief, one of the things that you will look at and try to encourage, I think that board is also part of something that needs to be out in the community as much as possible. The idea of having commissioner meetings on the second floor of the police building is not conducive to the public trying to get to those. I think that as you're talking about quarterly public forums, there needs to be at least a quarterly meeting that's held in a place that is conducive for the public to be able to get to and feel comfortable at and be able to ask the questions and to be part of that. So I would encourage you as you go through that to take a look at those. One of the things that had been established many years back, and I think it's something that I'm not sure is being currently used by our patrol officers, but when we went to the community policing philosophy across the whole department, we had created what was called a go bag. That go bag had a series of information that was put in it, so that when an officer was, whether it was stopping a young person that, you know, needed a place for recreation, or whether it was stopping being called to a domestic violence incident, there was information that they were able to readily hand out, and that they were able to maybe not take them to that service, but at least give them something so that they had that to look at and to consider. You know, we constantly talk about officers understanding, let's use the leash law as a perfect example. You have new officers come on and the dog's running loose, and an officer comes up and goes, you know, well, there's nothing I can do. Well, yeah, there is. You can write a ticket, you can do these things, but if that pamphlet was there that they could also be educating that property owner on, I mean, those are things I think that are useful for officers. And I think, again, I know they're running from call to call. I get that. But if it's sitting in the front of their patrol car and it's right there and they're color-coded and they're able to pull it immediately as they know the call that they're going into, I think it ends up being beneficial. I realize paper, I get all the things that, things get updated in that. I'm not telling you to print thousands. As things change, you need to make changes with those. But again, I think sometimes someone isn't as comfortable the first time somebody's talking to them about something, but when they carry that card around or they carry that flyer around, sometimes then they go on their own and are able to do that. So I would encourage you to look at that. As you were talking about reporting, my only concern, that I have voiced over and over again is oftentimes we continue to point people to the computers. We have those that don't have the access to computers. We also have the elderly who do not want to be involved in computers. So as you're looking at things to save officers' times, there also has to be an avenue that is cognizant of those other things. We have such a diverse population here that English as a second language sometimes becomes monumental when you're trying to do things on a computer and follow and understand. So I think there are some areas there that I would encourage you as you're looking at this that you might look at as well. And the last one, when we were talking about the soft targets and the things that had happened just recently, you had talked about El Paso and Ohio. I hope you're also looking at the Garlic Festival because that was an area similar to Common Ground that was very easy. I mean, if you followed the chain, you wouldn't have gotten through the door, but they came in the back door. And we have numerous festivals and numerous of those types of things throughout the city, and I think that's something else that we need to make sure that we're looking at and training for as part of that.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much for that. And I'll say the last 2 years, we did some things just specifically for that reason that's was happened out at the Garlic Festival. So
Okay.
we did some changes to the Common Ground response, the Prime Festival response, and so forth as a result
Great.
of that. Silver Bells, without going into details. But
Yeah.
I really think that we have been ahead somewhat, but we don't stay ahead long. We're always trying to go to the next thing that mitigates those issues as best as possible. So
Great, thank you. Is there anything else for the chief? Seeing nothing, we want to thank you very much for being here, answering our questions. We encourage the public to get out. I don't have the list in front of me. Do you have the list of times that you're going to be out in the public?
I apologize, I do not have that list on me.
All right. Well, we'll try to get that before the end of the meeting, and we'll make sure that I would ask Mr. Tate, do you happen to have that list in front of you?
Madam President, I do not, but I'll work on getting it.
Okay. Vice President Spatafor just pulled it up. Thank you.
I've got it.
Thank you.
These are all 6 to 8. They include free ice cream and a bounce house.
You know, we're supposed to be promoting
Oh,
and
right.
talking.
And Chief Green. Right. August 13th at Cristo Rey Community Center, August 15th at St. Michael's Episcopal Church, August 21st at Alfreda Schmidt Community Center, and August 22nd at the Neighborhood Empowerment Center.
Okay. So if there are more opportunities, we want, to the public to be able to come out and talk to you and engage.
Thank you very much, Council. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay, at this time, our next presentation is ranked choice voting. If those that are here for that presentation would please come forward, and you might need to pull up a few extra chairs in front of us. Pardon? Okay. We do have this on our, you have a PowerPoint. We do have this for City TV, so as we're going through this, so that we'll be able to keep up where that is. We've had requests to come forward to council to talk about this issue. We have reached out and asked the Secretary of State's office for some clarification with that, and have not heard back. This is just a presentation. We are not taking any action at this time, but it is a learning process for us here at council. So with that, I will let you introduce yourselves, make sure that the mic is on, the green light is on, and that you bring it up close to you so that the audience here can hear you as well. Thank you. No,
That sounds better.
that's
There we
better.
go. All
Bright
right.
green light, I should say.
There we go.
Okay.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen of the City of Lansing, members of the Committee of the Whole, I want to thank you for having us out tonight, for giving ranked choice voting a chance to have its case made for the city. This very night, as has been mentioned, the Committee of the Whole has a bill that it could call up whenever it wanted that would give voters the choice to make ranked choice voting the standard in the City of Lansing for all of our local elections. This would allow us to forego the costly process of running primaries and would make us the kinds of leaders that this city strives to be in innovating our processes. There's a lot to be said on the topic, and I think Hugh and Jim have presentations prepared that will say it quite eloquently. We'd like to invite you to ask any questions you may have at the end of our presentation. We'll be as edifying as we possibly can. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Max. I'm Jim DeLine. Most of you know me. He mentioned this cost savings of ranked choice voting. In Lansing tomorrow, we've got an election, and there are very few races on the ballot. But no matter how few races are on the ballot, the city clerk's office needs to be fully staffed. Every precinct needs to be fully staffed. With ranked choice voting, that expense would go away. Primaries would go away. The handout that you have lists a lot of cities that are using ranked choice voting now for a variety of things. And it's interesting that in November, the citizens of New York City will have a ballot issue that they're voting on. And the ballot issue in New York City is to allow ranked choice voting for the mayor, for city council, and for many other areas as well. Now, for the public, Council President Wood mentioned this is an introduction. It is. Don't expect to see this on the City of Lansing's November ballot. As the ranked choice voting advocates, we will continue to keep this in front of City Council. We will continue to keep it in front of the citizens of Lansing in general. Hugh McNichol has a presentation that he's going to give, and we have a more comprehensive presentation which is available for any neighborhood association or church or other organization. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Hugh McNichol.
Thank you for allowing us to give this public presentation outlining the benefits of ranked choice voting. My name is Hugh McNichol IV. I'm a lifelong Lansing resident and graduated of Everett High School. I'm an Army
I
War.
think you're going to have to switch places. If Jim and
Need
you
to be able to see the
would
TV, though.
switch.
Hey, let's go with this.
All right, then push that so you can get a little more.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
now you can. Thank you.
Thank you for allowing us to give this public presentation outlining the benefits of ranked choice voting. My name is Hugh McNichol IV. I'm a lifelong Lansing resident and graduate of Everett High School. I'm an Army War veteran. I've been a small business owner here in Lansing since 2009. I first learned about ranked choice voting during the 2015 primary season. RCV is a simple upgrade that allows voters to rank the candidates in order of their preferences, first choice, second choice, third choice, and so on, instead of having to vote for just one. So here's how easy it is for, oops, we're skipping a slide here. Okay. Here's how easy it is for voters to rank their preferences. This is from the League of Women Voters in Maine, who now use RCV statewide. It says, bubble in 1 next to your first choice, bubble in 2 next to your second choice, and so on. And here's how the votes are counted. First, we count all voters' first choices. If anybody has over 50%, they win. If not, we eliminate the candidate in last place, just like we'll be doing tomorrow's at-large race. But instead of wasting everyone's time and money on another election, since we already know who they prefer, their vote is moved to their next highest preferred candidate. This process is repeated until a candidate emerges with more than 50% of the vote, and that person is elected. So here's how the city of Minneapolis displayed their most recent election results. Whoops. For mayor, They adopted RCV back in 2006, and voter turnout has steadily increased all the way up to 42.45% in this most recent election. There was roughly 100,000 votes cast. First, they counted all the first choice votes. Since nobody had a majority, they had a leader with 25%. That means that 75% of voters might have wanted anyone else to win. Oh, did it again. Most cities have no way of knowing the true level of support that winners have, but since Minneapolis uses RCV, they know who voters would have voted for if their highest ranked candidate wasn't running or couldn't win. So since no candidates received a majority, they eliminated the candidate that didn't get enough votes, and those voters' votes were moved to the most preferred remaining candidate. That pile on the right represents the voters that chose not to rank any more candidates when they were eliminated. The number of votes needed to get 50% decreases as shown by the blue line at the top. Since they still didn't have anyone with a majority, they eliminate the last place candidate and do that again until somebody receives over 50% of the vote. One of the things that they talked about doing was switching to a multiple round system like we have here. The cost estimate for that was in the millions of dollars for them. So they're saving millions of dollars. They're getting their results instantly. They're empowering voters by letting them express their full preferences. And instead of Jacob Fry winning with 25%, he was able to win with a majority of over 50%. After Minneapolis implemented RCV and people got to see how it works, voters in St. Paul adopted it too. After that, St. Louis Park adopted it, and now there's a handful of cities across the state that also want to rank their choices. And it's not just their state, as you see. Ranked choice voting is now being used in at least 26 different states for various races at different levels. At least 6 states will be using RCV in their presidential primaries. Our map disappeared. 6 states will be using RCV in their presidential primaries, possibly more. Multiple cities, 10 different states, including Michigan, will be using RCV to elect city officials. Cambridge, Massachusetts, home to Harvard, has been using RCV in every local election since 1942, and other cities are using it there now in that state as well.
If you could wait just a second, we can see what City TV, we're offline right now with the PowerPoint. Okay. Thank you.
I support ranked choice.
Okay.
Okay, here's our map.
Yeah.
All right.
We're back again.
So Santa Fe, New Mexico used RCV to elect their mayor and experienced record voter turnout there too. Exit polling there showed that more than 90% of voters were happy with the new system. Roughly 2/3 of voters ranked every candidate on the ballot. Michigan has made national news recently after the city of East Point agreed to a settlement with the U.S. Department of Justice, meaning voters there will get to rank the candidates for city office this November. The city of Ferndale will either be implementing this system in 2019 or 2021. 69% of voters in Ferndale chose to adopt it into their city charter. Lansing can do that too. But Michigan has a history of ranked choice voting that goes back before that, all the way to the 1970s. In 1974, Ann Arbor used it in one election and elected their first and only black mayor. The outcome was challenged in court and RCV was upheld. The court case is known as Stevenson versus the Ann Arbor Board of Canvassers. The reason Ann Arbor isn't still using the system today is because the losing party put a repeal bill on the ballot, which barely passed during a low turnout April election the following year. Aside from just cities, Louisiana has allowed military overseas voters to rank the candidates since the 1990s, and 5 states have followed suit since. This is important for service members. As someone that's been deployed, I can tell you that mail can sometimes take weeks or months before it's received by the soldier or Marine or sailor or airman. After their ballot is filled out, it can take more weeks or months until it arrives back in Lansing. For any deployed military overseas service member that wants to vote now, they must fill out a request for absentee ballot and send it back, and then our clerk's office sends them a ballot, and it takes however long to get there. Of those service members from Lansing that follow those steps, less than 50% of them are able to return a ballot in time to be counted. Those are Lansing numbers. Less than 50% of military overseas ballots are returned in time to be counted here. For them, RCV would make voting easier and allow them 3 more months for their ballot to arrive back in Lansing in time to count. Our proposal would help them too. In 2016, Maine became the first in the country to pass RCV statewide, and in 2018, they became the first to use it statewide. The reason that cities in Michigan, like ours, can adopt ranked choice voting is because of the Home Rule Act, which says that elections may be held by a preferential ballot, among other things. Preferential voting and ranked choice voting are the same thing. This is also sometimes called instant runoff voting. It's all ranked voting. It's all the same thing. As I mentioned before, Stevenson versus Ann Arbor Board of Canvassers and the Home Rule Act are the legal precedents here in Michigan, in case anyone tells you it's not legal. And the Department of Justice says it's legal too. Here's our city clerk, Chris Swope, talking about ranked choice voting. Hopefully.
I support ranked choice voting, and it's something that I have looked at more and more over the last several years. On a city level, we could change the charter and do it. Our voting system will accommodate it. And if you think about it on a statewide basis, when you get to a general election, sometimes we have third-party candidates who get small percents of the vote, and people voting for them may know that they have no opportunity of winning, but that's what they believe in, and they want to give that person that vote. Well, if we had ranked choice voting, you could select that person as your first choice, and then a person who maybe has more of a chance of actually being competitive, your second choice, and we could end up getting more of a realistic view of voters' true choice. I think it provides a more accurate way for people to provide their true choice, and I think people intuitively understand it. You know how to, if you get a survey, it asks you to rank something from 1 to 5. I think it's easy to understand. I think it's possibly easier to understand than sometimes the way we bounce back and forth between you can vote for 1 person in this office and 2 in this and 1 in this, and so I think it would have a lot of benefits, and I do support it.
He mentioned how we currently vote for 1 in some races and 2 in others, and this sometimes confuses voters. Others bullet vote or vote strategically, only voting for 1. There's actually about 1 out of every 4 voters in Lansing do that. RCV eliminates the confusion and the incentive to vote strategically like that. And this slide shows why it's a national issue too. So the winner in this race had 36% of the vote. That means that more than 60% of voters in his own party might have wanted anybody else but him. In fact, this candidate didn't receive a majority in any state's primary until his home state, more than halfway through the process and after he'd already clinched the nomination, without getting a single majority anywhere. Now the same thing is happening to the other party. With 20-plus candidates, it's possible for someone to win with less than 10% of the vote. This is why 6 states, soon to be 7, have already decided to allow ranked choice voting in their upcoming presidential primaries. Independents and third-party supporters have been advocates for a long time because RCV allows them to run without being spoilers, which is the flaw that Rush has been accused of exploiting. We can fix that. RCV is an important issue at every level. In Lansing, we use the top 2 system to ensure that eventual winners receive a majority of the vote, but we pay for it, and it has its own list of problems. Our primary elections have a dismal voter turnout, typically between 5 and 10%. This means that 90 to 95% of registered voters don't participate, but it costs every taxpayer regardless. Our city clerk estimates that implementing RCV and eliminating this primary would save us $80,000 every election cycle. That could hire a new police officer or a lot of other things. Officials in other cities have estimated the savings to be in the millions of dollars per year. Jim brought up that New York City is voting on this in November. Estimates there is that New York City will save $10 to $13 million by switching to this system. Other resources wasted including polling space, paper, ink, envelopes, advertising dollars, etc. And here are the benefits of ranked choice voting that we haven't talked about yet, I don't think. RCV empowers voters by letting them express all of their preferences. It reduces negative campaigning. I really like this one. RCV completely changes the level of discourse while campaigning, especially door-to-door and face-to-face. Under our current system, when a candidate or their supporters are campaigning and they see a competitor sign in the yard, they skip that house. But with RCV, everyone's incentivized to have a discussion about the issues that they agree on and to find common ground. They'll say, if I can't be your first choice, consider me for your second choice. As discussed, RCV increases voter turnout. It increases candidate participation because candidates can run without fear of splitting the vote or being labeled a spoiler. It ends strategic voting and bullet voting. It's easier for military and overseas voters to participate, and RCV saves money, time, and resources. And we're happy to answer any questions from the council or at the public at this time.
Are there any council questions at this time? See any, Vice President Spatafor?
Thank you all for being here. I've talked to all of you over the course of the last couple of years about this topic. One thing you might have given more thought to than I have over the course of the couple of years is how does this comport with our city charter, though? The charter does require primary elections. Do you know how that would work there?
Having written the bill to amend the charter that's in front of you, I can tell you that the bill you could consider would simply eliminate any discussion of primaries. It's all contained within the same section, and the amendment would simply nullify any need for them.
So maybe this is for the city attorney. It's 2.204, Jim. Do we have to amend the charter to implement this then, correct?
Clearly, there are a lot of aspects to this, council member. We haven't been asked by anyone to research this. However, just general principles, aside from the cited Home Rule City Act, which is a mandatory that orders the cities to adopt provisions with respect to elections, the charter only has 2 references to this type of topic, and that is basically follow state law. The election commission follows state law in the conduct of elections, and the city follows state law. It's in 2 separate provisions. So clearly there would have to be a charter amendment, unless, and then we, in a research, we would have to see what's in state law, number one. Another option would be for legislation that would overrule the charter provision, that is state legislation that would specifically authorize. So there are different avenues here, but clearly, if we were just looking at the charter, yes, we'd have to amend the charter.
Thank you. I just wanted to be clear. Thank you.
Are there other questions? Councilmember Washington.
Thank you, Madam President. I really want to thank you for being here. As I told you earlier, I really didn't get it, but I'm more of that visual kind of learner. I get it. It's kind of like having the primary and the general all at the same time, and I really appreciate it. And I guess I was thinking with ranked choice voting, and this is just I don't mean to be political here, but perhaps if we'd have done it that way, Hillary Clinton may have taken Michigan because those that voted for Bernie Sanders would have, I'm sure, put her as second. So I can see how this could make a lot of sense, and I really appreciate you getting through this skull.
Without getting overly political, it's worth noting that ranked choice voting has brought up voter turnout everywhere that it occurred, so it's entirely possible that the result of a lot of elections would be different, not just Michigan.
Councilmember Jackson.
Thank you for the presentation, and I know that this is a learning presentation, but wouldn't it be sweet if one day we push it out and let the people decide, since it's up to them? And
I'm sorry, that's not.
And I
We're
didn't
not
mean
doing
to
that.
get an applause, but it's just our electorate of the city, so figure they could vote.
Are there other council member comments? Part of the reason that this was a presentation was Vice President Spatafor has reached out to the Secretary of State's office, and we're waiting for some information back from them. We would also then, after we receive that information, work with the city attorney's office based on the information that's provided from the Secretary of State's office before we move forward. So those are things that we want to make sure that we have in place. Councilmember Dunbar and then Councilmember Spitzley.
Excellent presentation. Thank you for telling me to push my button. In the example that was shared about the community that voted to institute ranked choice voting, was the reason that they had to vote was to open up the charter and change their requirements? I'm trying to figure out because if it wasn't a charter change, the local legislator could make that decision, correct?
Are you talking about Ann Arbor?
Was that? Okay, or East Point.
So East Point didn't vote to implement the system. East Point is implementing this due to a settlement with the U.S. Department of Justice.
Okay.
But Ferndale did put this on the ballot as a charter amendment. 69% of voters voted to approve it. And did that answer your question?
Yep. So in any place where the people have voted to institute this, is it because they have to open their charter?
In Michigan, yes.
Okay.
And I might mention, one of the reasons Councilmember Spatafor might not have heard back from the Secretary of State yet is the Secretary of State is working very closely with the city clerk in East Point and with the Macomb County clerk to work out exactly the logistics. They've got to do ranked choice voting in November, and so some of the questions you might have can't be answered yet because they're still dotting the i's and crossing the t's.
Thank you. Councilmember Spitzley.
Thank you, Madam President. My question was answered, but I do want to thank you guys for coming and do the presentation. I know I've met with you guys, but it is something that goes on the ballot, and folks in the city of Lansing will make the determination, and so thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And as we get additional information, we'll pass that out to you so that you're aware of it. And then as we get commentary from the city attorney as well. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right. That takes us into the Board of Water and Light stump removal update. Good evening.
Hi. Am I on? There we go.
It's a bright green light on.
Yes, I believe so.
Okay.
Yep. Looks like
All
we're good to
right,
go.
Thank you.
All right. I am Brina Pugh. I'm the Community Relations Manager for the Lansing Board of Water and Light. I'm here on behalf of General Manager Dick Peffley because he is out of the office this week, so he was unable to attend the meeting. So I wanted to provide a quick update on stump removal. The BWL has had internal discussions to determine that, like the city of Lansing, we also do not have the resources to do stump removal. At the last meeting, Councilmember Wood had asked us to provide a list of things that she could discuss further, so I have some answers to those things. So,
Okay.
You had asked if we could inform council members of meetings related to tree trimming in our neighborhoods. And of course we can do that, but mostly our tree trimming process is a customer-based process. So once we're going into a neighborhood, we send a letter to that neighborhood saying, hey, we're gonna be here, we're gonna be tree trimming, and then after we've determined whether their trees are going to be trimmed or removed, we use door card system to let them know if that's happening or not. So most of the time we're invited to neighborhood meetings to talk about tree trimming at some point, and we can make sure to be better about doing our due diligence to let our city council members know that we're gonna be there. We also do provide an updated map on our website. So if you go to lbwl.com and you go to tree trimming, we provide a map there that shows you the areas that we've completed and the areas that we've yet to trim. So a really great resource for all of you guys to look at your specific wards. You had also asked about our wood salvage list, and we have updated that. So that's updated as of 2 months ago. That's on our new website as well, so it should be much more accessible. We are losing a lot of our wood salvage contacts because we're just saturated the market. There's too much wood and people don't really have a use for it. But we continue our commitment that General Manager Dick Peffley gave to you guys at your Board of Commissioners meeting, joint meeting, that if you have any issues and if residents have any issues, to contact us directly and we'll see what we can do. We've resolved a couple of those even just in the last week, so I know that our forestry department is taking care of it. You had also asked about the tree trimming budget and seen it was reduced because tree trimming is no longer happening. Maybe there would be some money there. But we are, once we're done with tree trimming on Labor Day, we will begin tree trimming again. So it's not ever done, it's just continuous management of it. So we'll start a new 5-year cycle at the end of the fall season, and we'll continue to tree trim. So we'll start back at the beginning. Anything that has had new growth, or maybe we missed it the first time around, that's when we'll do tree trimming and removal. Obviously, you'd invited us to attend this meeting and give you an update, and the update is that unfortunately we don't have the funds for stump removal. And then the last thing you had asked about was the comprehensive tree replacement plan. So General Manager Dick Peffley is very amenable to looking at a more comprehensive plan than we currently have. Our current plan is that when we tree trim at someone's house, we work with the homeowner to discuss whether they're going to need a tree or not. Sometimes we get homeowners saying that they don't want a tree because it might not be able to go where it was before. The reason why it can't go there is because it was growing into the line. So when we're working on the right tree for the right place, that has determined that sometimes there's not a specific place for that tree. But we're open to expanding that program. We don't know what that would look like, but we did this year expand our program to include the BWL tree planting grant, which was available as part of the Neighborhoods in Bloom type of program, so neighborhoods could apply for it. So we've looked at a couple other options. We're open to other ones, but unfortunately, the budget is just not giving us room for stump removal.
Okay, just to make myself abundantly clear, when I talked about the budget, what the Board of Water and Light was doing based on the ice storm and the outages that we had, you went full gear at trying to make sure that you did a massive tree trimming. And yes, you worked from neighborhood to neighborhood. I'm well aware that you're now going back for the 5 years, but you hadn't trimmed for 15 years.
Right.
So what you're going into right now is going to be less than what you had to do when this started. So the amount of money that had been set aside and that you utilized for the first round can nowhere, I absolutely cannot believe that the cost of doing business has gone up to the point that you would still utilize that same amount of a budget. So that's where I was getting at. There should be some money within that to be able to do some stump removal. And, I am disappointed that the board is not looking at this, and I don't mean that you're not looking at it. You've gone back and you've looked at it, researched it, and come up with the fact that it's too costly. But again, the integrity of these neighborhoods, and I realize that it could be Councilmember Washington that said, now that my tree looks like that, take it down, but it could be Councilmember Garza who comes home and there's no tree there. And those were the ones that I was pushing for and working for and trying to come up with a way to deal with that. You can put in any plan you want for adding trees to the neighborhood, but if you've got that tree stump there that's still sitting there, where are you going to put them? Those have to be ground and done away with to be able to plant a new tree. I know Mr. Tate's here representing the administration, and my understanding from the administration, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Tate, is the fact that you're going to tell us the exact same thing, that the administration has determined that there isn't enough money in the budget to be able to do stump removal. Is that correct?
That's correct, Madam President.
Okay. So now what we have is neighborhoods out there that are being told that, guess what? The city's not going to do anything, and the board's not going to do anything, and you just have to live with this. And that, that's disheartening. It really is disheartening. When we look at the amount of money and the things that are happening at the Board of Water and Light, and the amount of things that, yes, I love the Scott Garden and what that building looks like and things like that, but we can't remove stumps. I just, how that affects that neighborhood and the perception in that neighborhood is devastating to the community. So it appears Councilmember Jackson, who's worked hard on this, Councilmember Hussein, who's worked hard on this, Councilmember Spitzley, who's worked hard on this, Councilmember Washington, I believe Councilmember Dunbar was also asked to look into this. You know, we have to now go back and say, so sad, too bad, you're stuck with what you've got. Thank you. Councilmember Jackson.
Thank you. I just want to echo the same sentiments. It's disappointing, but I do appreciate you letting us know, so now we have something. But the most disappointing part is that the neighborhood engagement process basically failed some neighborhoods and groups of neighbors, specifically the Colonial Village Neighborhood Association. They met, and I saw you there a few times.
Yeah.
Countless meetings, complaints, many communications to all of council, the mayor, budget. They came for budget and everything, and there's nothing we can do. And I understand that the official line is that it's too costly, but then again, you know, where's the priorities and what is important to people would make that determination for what too costly is, because it's subjective and not
Yeah.
objective.
Yeah.
So just had to express my disappointment.
Councilmember Spitzley.
Thank you, Madam President. I mean, I gotta believe that, you know, I get resources, and quite frankly, you know, I'm not gonna beat up on BWL because, you know, we are a city council, and we also look to our city to try to find a solution as well. And we have the equipment. We know we have the equipment. We were told we have the equipment. And so there's gotta be a resolution here. You know, we always talk about collaboration and collaborative efforts between, you know, the city and other folks. And so I gotta believe that there's a resolution where we as a city can work with the Lansing Board of Water and Light to address this. I mean, it can't be that many stumps, right? And so it is a little disappointing, but it's not just on you. It's not just on the Board of Water and Light. I think as a collective group, the city, the board, you know, we are failing. And, you know, and we need to do a better job to try to find a resolution to this. I mean, you know, I think back to the Red Cedar thing, where, you know, the assessment, you know, we found a solution. We've got to find I just think we need to find a solution. It's a city service. You know, we need to provide this service. And if someone wants their stump ground, I mean, it's, you know, we should be able to find the money to do it. And so I don't want to in my case, beat up on the Lansing Board of Water and Light solely. I think it's a collective failure on part of the city and Lansing Board of Water and Light. We should be able to find a joint solution on this. Thank you.
I appreciate your comments, Councilmember Spitzley, but it's been made abundantly clear by the administration and by the Board of Water and Light that there is no money in the budget. They're not doing anything.
Again, and Madam President, if I may, I heard that, but you know, the solution for Red Cedar assessment was to do an assessment on the residents. And when we pushed back, a solution was found. There's got to be a solution.
We've been pushing.
I know. It's just unfortunate because this is something that we should be able to resolve for our city residents.
I don't disagree with you. Vice President Spatafor.
Well, I would just appreciate the remarks. I thank you for coming. Thank you for giving us a clear answer, first of all. It's not the one we wanted, but it's definitive and to the point. And I just would urge, too, Public Service Committee will be looking at our budget priorities in the next couple of weeks. And I know it's not ideal, but that's maybe something the council can take a look at, is finding the money for next fiscal year then.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Washington.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm going to echo the same thing. This is a public utility owned by the people. This is the city government owned by the people. This, I don't think, is a heavy lift. I can't believe that we can't find the money somewhere. As my colleague said, there aren't that many stumps. It looks awful. It looks like you're just tearing things down and leaving them. It's an eyesore. And I'm a big advocate of replenishing the trees that have come down too. but what are you going to do? Put them next to a stump? I just think we need to go back to the table, and we can do this through public service, but like I said, it's a public utility, it's a public government, and we need to listen. Thank you.
Councilmember Hussein.
Actually, really appreciate those comments. When we talk about the advantages of having a municipally owned utility, those are the advantages. It's supposed to be the neighborhood engagement. It's supposed to be the listening piece. It's supposed to be the responding in earnest. It's supposed to be all of those things. The tree stumps and the tree removal has absolutely affected quality of life. And I was really hoping that maybe we could use Colonial Village as a model, but I was hoping that we could also understand that everybody in the city of Lansing, experience this in common, essentially. And so even in some of our most economically disadvantaged areas, people are having their quality of life impacted by these stumps. And so I hope that, moving forward, and I really appreciate Councilman Spatafor's comments, as well as Councilwoman Washington's and Councilwoman Spitzley's, but I hope we don't completely walk away from the table. I hope we continue to explore outside of the box kind of solutions. I don't know if we can leverage grants. I don't know. I think Councilman Garza, a few meetings back, brought up the idea of maybe ranking in a kind of an objective way these stumps and trying to get maybe through the first cycle the most severe, and then maybe through the second cycle, the second 5 year, because my understanding is you're just going to continuously go back and start these cycles over to slowly mitigate some of the tree stumps out in our community. But I really hope that moving forward we continue the conversation in earnest and really come up with some solutions. Thank you.
Before I call on Councilmember Garza, I know Councilmember Spitzley asked me about the number. If you remember, we were told there were over 5,000 stumps in the city that needed to be. And that is not all the Board of Water and Light. Those are ones that the city took down trees in the right-of-way as well. But we have no way of knowing how many of those have deteriorated to a point that they don't need to be removed. We don't know how many of those are ones that people don't care whether they're there or not. So, part of my suggestion had been, one of the where we had been hearing the most was to start in Colonial Village, and as we move forward, then looked at each other community, and again, put some stipulations such as if the board chose to take down the tree because it needed to come down, not that a resident asked that it be taken down, then they bear the cost and do that grinding. Councilmember Garza.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you for being here tonight and answering questions for us. I really do appreciate that. Yeah, and like Spatafor said, it wasn't the answer we wanted to hear, but we understand. And thank you, Councilman Hussein, for referencing what I asked two meetings ago, as far as, is there a collaboration that we can get with the city and the Board of Water and Light as far as the tree stumps that heave the sidewalks so bad that they've been patched multiple times or grounded down? I'd really hope that you guys could go back to the table and sit down and maybe get to the high priority ones and see if we can't get those ones taken care of.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And this issue will be followed up in the Public Service Committee. Vice President Spatafor, and then if you can get back to us on that.
You talking about through the budget priorities?
Pardon?
Our budget priorities?
Budget priorities, checking about the heaving of the sidewalks, whether there's some way to possibly deal with those alone, if you would look into both of those.
We'll take a look at it.
All right, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, that takes us on to code compliance. Mr. McGrain. Mr. McGrain is the Director of the Economic Development Planning. Also, code compliance. Code compliance is under his department. We have had discussions in general services as well as here on the council floor dealing with code enforcement, how a project is, or a person is cited, the determination on a number of things that happen through that citing, and then if those are not taken care of, the next steps with those. Mr. McGrain had offered to come and address council and be able to try to answer those questions for us. And so he is here this evening. And also, since it's being broadcast for the public to have a better understanding, we were just handed out a memo, and we will make sure that this is added to our council packet, and we'll see if we can get some copies of this for the public that might want them as well. Okay. With that, turn it over to Mr. McGrain.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, council members, for having me this evening. And first of all, I think maybe an apology to Sherry. I want you to know that she's done a wonderful job of asking me about visuals for tonight and materials. I missed her deadline, so hence your memo is in front of you. Also, too, this presentation would lend itself to some wonderful visuals. I'm going to ask everybody to just sort of think in their minds some of the things we're dealing with instead of seeing them up in front of us. So my apologies that there is not a PowerPoint and that you're getting this memo at this point. But again, Sherry, thank you for having reached out to me and reminded me of the deadline. So let me start first again. Thank you for having me. The memo that you have in front of you is a memo that I provided about 2 weeks ago to the mayor upon his request. He did want sort of an update on some of the more enforcement-oriented things that we've been doing lately, and with his permission, I am releasing this to you as well, and certainly it can be shared with the public. If I could, just a couple of highlights, and I'm going to read them for our audience and for those at home. What I wanted to do was really talk about the first half of this calendar year and speak to you about all of the things that our staff has been doing from a compliance and enforcement standpoint. And so even though there are other departments and other things we do, I did just want to use this as an opportunity to touch on code enforcement, zoning, and parking.
Before you get started, if you can and if you know, since you're starting the first part of the year, can you tell us how many code officers and different ones that you had working at that time? I think that will help us as well.
Absolutely, ma'am, and I had sort of woven that into different things
Okay,
that I wanted to say. I would tell you at this point, we are, for fiscal year 2019, we had 9 code enforcement and 4 premise officers. Those positions were not all fully filled throughout the course of the year. You all have approved in this current fiscal year a 10th code enforcement officer position. I will tell you, I feel like we're constantly filling positions, which is not a bad thing. Of course, people retire. Of course, people advance throughout the organization. Premise has become sort of an entry point for talented folks. And then when code enforcement positions open up, should they be qualified, talented, make it through the interview process, it is a great way to work their way up through the system. Of course, every time a code enforcement officer position gets filled by a premise inspector, I'm now hiring for premise again. So even just today, I was in interviews for both premise and code. We are filling positions. But again, to answer that question, we were slated for 9 positions, 9 code enforcement positions, and 4 premise inspector positions.
And for the audience, can you explain the difference between a code officer and a premise officer?
Sure. The code enforcement officers are the higher level. Those folks can certainly do everything that a premise inspector can do, but they wind up spending most of their time. They're a little bit more skilled. They spend most of their time actually doing the housing inspections, the rental inspections. Whereas a premise inspector, a little bit more of a junior position, they are the ones who are going to be actively patrolling the city, responding to complaints, writing up trash, grass violations, front yard parking, things of that nature.
All right, thank you.
I would mention, too, from a hiring standpoint, and I will be getting to this in a moment, you all had approved in your last year's fiscal year, budget, a commercial corridor specialist position. I will be letting you know we did fill that position a couple of months ago, and I'll be updating you briefly on his work.
Councilmember Hussein raised his hand.
Just very quickly, you said something that was interesting to me. You said that the premise inspectors actively respond to complaints. And my curiosity, we are being told to make sure that we channel everybody to Lansing Connect. Are our premise inspectors Have they been trained on Lansing Connect? Do they onboard their issues? And obviously, our side of it looks like is through CityWorks, but is that how they actually receive the complaints? Are they receiving those from Scott? How do they actually onboard those issues?
As I move forward, I'll let you all know that we take complaints in any manner. Certainly, we would love them pressed through the app. I think as we're workshopping the app, and by the way, we're still doing some workshopping. There's not an active back and forth communication piece with a complainant, but we're really, really close. We had a major breakthrough at a meeting not too long ago. But, I let people know, let us know about the complaints as you can. I get stopped in the grocery store, as I'm sure you all do, with complaints. Sometimes people just coincidentally know me or know what I do. I think sometimes, too, they talk about, gosh, there's this house near me, and they don't know who I am. But, anything I get, whether it's in person, email, phone call, the app, smoke signal, we take those and we respond. And I hope you're all pleased with the job that we've been doing.
Just as a follow-up, because you answered the question kind of. So if somebody uses Lansing Connect to actually submit an issue, is it the premise inspector that actually receives the issue, or does it go through command of sorts and then channeled to that premise inspector?
It would typically come into our office, and then it would get routed to the appropriate premise inspector for follow-up. Councilman, I think I've told you before, too, because we've been changing boundaries and we've increased our numbers and things like that, it has been difficult to assign somebody to a particular region, so we have had to adjust our map throughout the year and a half, past year and a half. So it does come to us, it does get routed to the person that handles that particular area.
Councilmember Garza.
Thank you, Madam President. So I wish you the best of luck with Lansing Connect. I mean, it's been troublesome for, I know, the majority of us council members up here. We get a call and we think that it's getting taken care of, and then it hasn't. And then we're getting called and getting yelled at, and then we talk to you guys, and you guys are working out the bugs. It's been, year and a half now or so, that we keep saying, we're getting the kinks worked out of it. Is there a possibility to actually have a follow-up picture to send back to us to say that, hey, look, this is what it used to look like because we sent a picture in, and this is what it looks like now, so that we know it's not just closed and we're not going to be getting a call from the constituent, mad, a month later that it still looks like that.
Sure, and I would tell you, Councilman, that again, I'm not satisfied fully with where we are. There are some two-way communications issues that haven't been solved. But one thing I do want to touch on too, and I appreciate when people do follow up with me on some of these complaints. Sometimes there are things that we can't take on. I'll touch on that in a moment. And I think other times too, there are situations that are really complicated. And even though we're working on them, they may not look resolved. Some of these are really challenging to resolve. So I would say there's a number of different situations. I think Lansing Connect might be one piece of that, but I think there are other things that are complicated too that we're working on.
Before you continue, Mr. Tate, we would like to have the administration have someone before us at the August 12th Committee of a Whole to talk about Lansing Connect. We continue to talk about this. We talked about it during the budget process, and so whoever is the lead on that, we would like to have them here at that meeting. Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. McGreen.
All right, thank you, Madam President. To, again, follow up with this letter that you have in front of you, just for the viewing audience's benefit, wanted to let you know really just the sheer numbers that we're dealing with. Between January 1st and June 30th of 2019, we have written 4,400 grass and weeds violations notices and 3,600 trash and debris notices. Our grass mowing contractor has been dispatched to 294 properties, our trash contractor to 361. We've written up 462 disabled motor vehicles and issued 103 front yard parking notices. We have been in some 2,700 buildings for rental inspections, and we've identified over 800 units that we suspect of operating without a current rental certificate. Twice in June, I wanted to let you all know that I did authorize weekend overtime hours for staff. We had a little bit of extra money in our budget, and I thought it was important to get some of our staff out there on the weekends. I know oftentimes we've heard that I might report something, we go out to find it, it's not there, and we hear that, well, it's a weekend thing. Maybe these folks have gotten smart to us. So we did put in some Saturday hours during which we did write up 400 violation notices, including 34 that dealt with improperly parked and stored vehicles. One thing I did want to point out in that overtime, we did come across a lot of people that were engaged in perhaps activities that they shouldn't have been, again, in terms of parking, nothing too wild. But a lot of times our folks are serving sort of an educational role. So even though we may not result, or there may not be a resultant violation notice, On those particular Saturdays, for instance, we did have an opportunity to educate people about, hey, don't park in your front yard, don't park that way in your backyard, et cetera. I mentioned briefly our commercial corridor specialist position. We did fill that with an internal candidate just back in April, May, Mr. Zachary Driver. Since May, he has visited with 66 businesses and written 78 correction notices. These have predominantly dealt with illegal signage, right-of-way signs, temporary signs, excessive window signage, improper parking, and zoning violations. This is also through June 30th, so I want you to know we're again another month in, but at that time, enforcement had primarily been focused on the south side, mostly on South Cedar, South Pennsylvania, South Waverly, though letters were written up on properties on Kalamazoo, Saginaw, Michigan as well. As the year progresses, my intention is that he will be routinely on all of our corridors throughout town, and I hope if you've been down Pennsylvania, you've noticed some of the difference that his work has already begun to make.
And before you go any further on with your memo, I would like to address the sign situation. I've received a number of calls, and I'm not sure how the information is being given to those who are in violation, but the people that are calling me have made it seem as if our code officer has been telling them that council's responsible for this, and that that we're the ones that they need to come to. Now, yes, we do the ordinances, and yes, we're the ones that did the sign ordinance. But I would hope that what they're doing is saying, we'll take your issues back to the department, because you have indicated to me there were some glitches and different things that you saw in the sign ordinance since it was passed before we had someone enforcing it, that you were going to bring some changes to us. So I would hope that part of the message for the people that are the boots on the ground is that, you know, we're taking this back, we're looking at it, but right now you are out of compliance and you need to rectify it this way, instead of putting it out there as if we did this just to be punitive to a particular business.
Madam President, I think Councilman Garza can attest to one such meeting we had with a business owner. It's been a little bit more complicated than I think we might have all expected. And as you did indicate, yes, we are going to be coming back with some of the nuances that we've seen. You know, our plan will be to, I think, present to you and the mayor what we're seeing in practice. I think there's, you know, certainly, you know, you look at the liquor store with a zillion cardboard faded signs blocking 100% of the windows, and I think we'd probably all be in agreement that we don't like that. But we're seeing other situations where maybe there's something attractive that looks like art. You know, maybe the alternative is that a business would close its curtains or blinds. So we're seeing in practice a whole bunch of other situations that are arising, and I think we are going to be coming back and displaying some pictures, some things that we've seen, and asking for some additional guidance.
Well, I'd encourage you to look. There was just an article that was printed in Grand Rapids, and they're looking at crime based on environmental design. And they've adopted a couple of ordinances dealing with that from a crime standpoint. And when we adopted the ordinance that we did, it had to do with the fact that people had complained about actually walking in on a place that that had been in the process of being robbed and no one could see going in, the police couldn't see. Those were some of the things that we were looking at trying to address.
Absolutely, Madam President. I understand that concern. What we've seen in reality is that folks can turn these signs the opposite way and continue to obscure their windows. They can close their curtains or blinds. They can do other things that I think would undo that. And while I agree with you, I'm all about the environmental things. I would imagine as a store owner, you would want that activity to be seen within and without of your store for not just crime prevention purposes, but for maybe even marketing purposes or activity. You know, I think there's a wide variety of reasons why you would want your windows to not be obscured. Again, what we're seeing in practice are a variety of other things that happen.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Yep, and I would just add, finally, the final statement in this memo, I included some things about parking. EDP took over parking on April 8th. The team moved from LPD over to the parking division located within my office. Came with 4 slotted enforcement officers. There were only 2 in effect filled. We have since filled all 4. With all 4 positions filled, for the most recent quarter, and this was actually an April 1st through July 9th stat, our parking enforcement officers wrote 10,493 tickets. Comparatively to that time last year, about 8,600 tickets were written. So just wanted to let you know via that memo that our folks have been pretty darn busy out there in the community.
All right, we have Councilmember Spitzley and then Councilmember Washington. I do want to make sure that the public is aware that one of the things that the Public Safety Committee is working on and very close to finishing up is the 2 to 5 parking permit issue, and we've been working with your department on that. So we're close to bringing that out and having a discussion with council. Councilmember Spitzley.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Brian. You brought up, when you talked about the parking, you know, one of the things that we look at when we enact these ordinances is the enforceability of them. And you know, this 2 to 5 parking, you know, I've gotten a couple people that have reached out to me, and you know, they're people that are parking in these areas that are supposed to be prohibited. But you know, how do you get someone to enforce that? Do you have enforcement that works within that time period so that you can enforce the ordinance that we have on the books regarding parking between 2 to 5 and on the streets?
Madam Councilman Spitzley, I do not have an overnight parking enforcement person right now, but I believe the mayor has indicated interest in working that out and figuring out a staffing model.
I appreciate that, because it is, I mean, you know, if we're going to enact the ordinance, we have to have a mechanism for enforceability. I mean, that's a service that we need to provide to our residents to do so, and not having somebody out there, if there are these issues, is problematic. And then we're not providing good government service if we're doing that, if we're having ordinances and we're not enforcing them. So I appreciate that.
Councilmember Washington.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Brian. These numbers are good. Here's my concern. You're the Planning and Economic Development Department. We're talking about co-compliance, we're talking about parking, we're talking about meters. How much time is left for actual planning for the city and actual economic development, going out and marketing our city and doing true economic development? I'm never hearing a whole lot. I'm watching the region around us go gangbusters. But in our economic development department, we're talking about parking and co-compliance. That's not your fault that these things are being put into this department. I'm concerned that the majority of the resources in the planning and economic department are not being spent the majority of the time in our economic development. Just my point.
Sure, Councilmember. Well, thank you for that comment. And I guess I would say I was invited here tonight to talk about enforcement and particularly trash, which is the focus of this particular memo and this presentation. So I would be happy to come back and talk about our other efforts. It was not what I was asked here to talk about. And you're absolutely right. It's a giant portion of what we do. It's not the focus of this presentation. But I'd be happy to come back and make that presentation at a later date.
Madam President, I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Brian.
Councilmember Hussein.
I would actually appreciate a subsequent conversation that doesn't just include Brian, but also Lee. I'd like to know what we're doing to advance our opportunity zones. I'd like to know what we're doing to inventory available property in the city of Lansing, what marketing materials we're putting together. Are we making sure those marketing materials include zoning, you know, and the like? What are we doing to truly be serious about economic development, particularly as it pertains to outside of the kind of the historic core? We know that these, and I don't want to just focus on obviously the north-southbound corridors, but they've been eroding for quite some time. And so I would really, really like to have that conversation. I think it's long past due. But I do have a code enforcement question. I know when I first started on council, we were funded for 8 code officers and 2.5 premise inspectors, and we didn't have a commercial code, commercial corridor inspector. You know, the administration, the council has worked together over the course of the last few years. We have also amended executive budgets to give you more tools and more resources within code, so we are now at 10-4 and 1, which I think is a substantial increase. Do you believe right now, I'm going to ask you kind of the same question I asked Chief Green earlier, do you have the resources to inspect, to compile correction notices, to follow up, to make sure that issues when we're actually inspecting our rental properties have been taken care of? Yeah, I'm always concerned by the fact that we just take a letter from sometimes some very disreputable slumlords, if you will, and we take it as the gospel. And then to get back and actually close out those certification processes, to make sure we're taking care of the trash and the grass. And those numbers are really impressive, but at the end of the day, I still see a lot of front yard parking. I see a lot of trash. I see issues that, I'm going to be honest with you, I have a couple things I wrote down. There are some issues that I put into Lansing Connect 73 weeks ago, and they're still being processed. There's some issues that front yard parking as an example. There's one we've discussed, and I've actually sent it by phone, by email, through Lansing Connect, and it's a simple front yard parking issue, and it's been 54 weeks, and it is still there. So do we have the resources necessary to take care of the city the way it deserves to be taken care of?
Councilman Hussein, in about a month, I'll have my full force. I would say ask me that question after that. We have not been fully staffed, as I mentioned, with the interviewing process, with the hiring process. So I anticipate within about a month, like I said, we just completed some interviews today for both premise and code. I expect that within the next month, we will have a full cadre of staff on hand.
Okay, let me rephrase it. Based on what you know, should we be fully staffed? Are those numbers appropriate? And obviously, training is key, staff morale is key, management from top down is key. And we talk a lot about efficiencies or lack thereof. Those are all important. Do you think it's going to be enough?
I can't answer that. I don't know. It'll be better. But I can tell you throughout the rest of this presentation that we're doing some other things too to ensure that, as you alluded to, training, there are other things we're doing too to make sure that we're in a better spot.
Just one last thing. I also want to make sure that moving forward, and I know a number of my council colleagues spend a lot of time on many of our multifamily properties. We have to, Brian, do a better job with our multifamily properties. You and I are scheduled to meet at 1 tomorrow at 10 a.m.
4:30.
You're. I'm sorry. That's another meeting. 4:30. You're absolutely.
I don't want to get in trouble for that. 4:30. 4:30.
Yeah, 10.
That's how eager I am to be there.
The 10 o'clock one might be pretty exciting too. What is it? Should I come?
But you've seen many of the pictures that I've sent. I think depicted in those pictures are, truly third world conditions, and it's absolutely not okay when we talk about helping people, not just be comfortable in poverty, but ascend from that poverty. We know education, we know community, we know housing, we know are absolutely key. And I cannot understand how some of these conditions are allowed to persist for the number of years that they've been allowed to persist, because I know as long as I've been on council, which I'm now in my 4th year, I've been beating the drum for some of these properties, these same exact properties, year in and year out. I've captured photos. It's almost like something out of Jacob Rees' How the Other Half Lives. For back in the 19th century. It is insane how some of our people are living in the city of Lansing. So, and I don't know if we have a joint task force. I don't know what we do, but we have tried very, very hard over the last several years in public safety. Councilwoman Wood has done a great job, I think, chairing that committee and trying to take, it's almost like whack-a-mole though, right? Trying to take certain properties up and trying to work with the administration and work with the law to try to, go after some of these landlords. But we really need a more comprehensive conversation and a more comprehensive fix. So again, we're not playing whack-a-mole with all of these properties. Thanks.
Okay, because we want him to get into the rest
Yeah,
of his
and I'm waiting with bated breath to hear the rest of the presentation. I just very quickly, and I have to just tag along on the multifamily because we have these same people that are running these horrific housing multifamily wanting to build more and more. And it's a huge problem for me as these people keep coming forward wanting to build more, and they're the ones that are allowing people to live in deplorable conditions. So when we get a hold on that, that'd be a really good thing.
All right, Mr. McGreen.
All right. Well, let me jump back in and let me tell you this. The remainder of my presentation is going to be a drill down on our trash process. And Council President Wood and Councilman Spatafor had been part of a pre-meeting where we had sort of talked about really what is the process and could I come in and kind of walk you through what we do when it comes to just trash specifically. So what I like to say is it usually starts with a complaint. We get thousands of complaints per year. They come in a variety of ways. As I mentioned, we're taking them via email, via the app, through phone calls, in person. Just today, as I was doing code interviews, one of my code staff was with me, and we probably had about a 2.5-hour block of time, during which point he had 50 emails and voicemails come through in about a 2.5-hour block. So they're busy. As I mentioned, we are workshopping the automated complaint process. Like I said, we're not quite there with Lansing Connect yet. What I'm hopeful to have soon is this two-way communication such that when you do make that complaint, things aren't sitting out there in limbo for 52 weeks, 73 weeks, some outrageous amount of time. We are not fully at this point able to close those out or provide that two-way communication, but we are continuing to work on that. We are close to being fully staffed, so like I said, we have additional time to be out there proactively writing up situations as well. If we receive a complaint, we do go out to the housing to verify the situation. We have become big on documentation since I've come in. I've stressed that we need additional photos. Those photos are worth 1,000 words. You see them when they come up to your level here for claims review. We like to verify too, because as I mentioned, not everything is always a code violation. I always sort of use the pink flamingos scenario. You may hate that your neighbor has pink flamingos out in their flower bed. We can't do anything about that. We can't always deal with taste. In fact, we seldom can deal with taste. So there are some situations we just unfortunately can't touch. But we do go out to verify if there's a situation, what the complaint is. Then we write it up. If we do find something, let's say we find the obvious pile of trash on the side of the house, we write it up. A letter goes out the next day notifying people of their 7-day window to clean something up. Another thing we've done this year, for some situations, we are deploying what we call sort of this early warning tag. You know, if you put a mattress out on the street and you didn't get a bulk trash and we come and find it, we're going to leave this behind. It just notifies you we came across a situation. Now, you're still going to get that letter. We're still going to do the legally required notice, but there's no reason why we can't give the person who put that mattress out, for instance, again, there's no reason why we can't leave an early warning notice, basically saying, yeah, that's not right, that's trash, get it out of there.
To stop you just for a second, now, does that just mean things that are at the curb, or does that include anything that would be considered trash in the yard?
It would include other situations. We're just rolling this out now, so we're still sort of experimenting with when we're putting it out and when we're not. You know, we do like talking to folks if they're there too. If we see somebody dropping a big screen TV on their curb, we're probably going to stop them and talk to them about it and say, you know, do you have your bulk trash tag if it's appropriate, or hey, you know that's not going to wander away. Nobody, you know, you can't leave that TV on the curb. So it depends, and we're still trying to workshop when exactly we would deploy this out. But we are starting to leave these behind. I forget how many we've burned through already.
So is there coordination with the Public Service Department? Because the last I knew, they had done away with tags. Are they now putting them back out again? Because part of the issue that we've heard in the neighborhoods is I call about this mattress that's out there because I didn't see a tag on it. And Public Service is saying you don't need a tag anymore, that once it goes into the system, our system, then when we send the bulk truck out to pick it up, they'll pick it up. But then you could come by as code compliance and see it sitting out there and write them up for it.
We've had coordinating conversations. We do check into that. We do make a call or look at the database to see if that person has a tag. And if something happens, if, say, we went by and the mattress was there and maybe they bought the tag later that day, when we send that letter, you know, if we get a call, we void it. We understand. So we've had those conversations about coordinating that very aspect.
So are they going to start putting tags out again?
I don't believe so, but I can't speak to that.
Okay, thank you. Member Spitzley.
I'm sorry. I don't get what just happened here then. So you're saying,
It used to be that when you had a bulk
Right.
item out, you
Yep.
would buy a tag. You would
yeah.
place the tag on there. The public service had said that people were tearing off the
Yeah.
tags and using them other places. But then when you have nothing on there, no one knows
Right.
whether,
So my question gets back to, though, notification of the resident if you find trash. So your office puts a tag out there. If they can't see, that's what I'm trying to figure out. So what's the yellow tag for then?
So I think there would be two situations. Let's say you're a homeowner. This had happened to me.
Yes.
I had a couch that I needed to get rid of. It went outside. It was an old leather couch. I bought my giant, bulk trash sticker. This was the old system. I would have put that giant bulk trash sticker on that couch because I called ahead, bought it. So the next day I came out and somebody had walked off with a cushion with a tag on it. So the frame of the couch is still sitting out there. So I think that had been a previous
Right.
issue.
Right.
Those tags could be taken. I mean, they were valuable. I forget how much they cost.
$5.
And when I come back with my visual presentation next time, I'll show you what ultimately happened to that couch. A couple hours later, somebody came by and skinned all the leather off of it so they could make moccasins and a quiver. I kid you not, there's some crazy creative people out there, but I wound up having to call a bulk trash company to come at that point and just pick up the frame and get it off my property. So I think the idea now is if you are then the responsible homeowner who wants to pay for that bulk trash, you call ahead, you buy essentially, and again, not my area, this is public service, but you would buy a virtual ticket, and then there's an inventory, they would send someone out to get it. There's no stolen sticker.
And I appreciate that. My question and my confusion comes in to the coordination that's happening. So you have that yellow sticker. Are you able to, by the push of a button or get online with your iPad when code enforcement's driving by saying, oh, that person has a bulk sticker, virtual sticker, so I don't need to put one of those in place? That's what I'm trying to figure out, the coordination here.
Sure. And again, I mean, this is designed for, let's say I'm an irresponsible landowner. I've left a rental, I've moved out of my home and I just deposited those mattresses on the curb and then pieced out of town. If we go by and see them, we're going to write you up like normal. But what this is doing is essentially we want to give somebody a heads up that like, yeah, you're going to get a letter in a few days, but just cut to the chase. Just take care of it now. You can get that mattress off the curb. Back to President Wood's questions, I think yours then too. What is that coordination level? We're still working that out. We do have access to that database, but at this point it's a little funky, so sometimes we still make a mistake. If we leave this behind and somebody calls us, of course we're not going to write it up. We understand that they've paid for that permit.
go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Jumping into from writing it up, from notifying somebody to compliance or dispatch, the reality is the vast majority of folks do take care of these situations, whether it's trash, whether it's grass. The vast majority of people get that letter. They're embarrassed. I remember getting a grass letter years ago and rushing right out to mow my grass. It was soaked, but I did it because I think most people want to be responsible citizens, and when they get that, they do it. Our experience has been most people take care of it. Some people call us for an explanation. The bulk trash is one. Sometimes they have a situation where they might need additional time. We do have some flexibility to grant some of that depending on the situation, depending on maybe a variety of factors. Probably less than 1 in 10 violations actually head then to our contractor, whether it's grass or trash. I gave you kind of the number of write-ups that we'd done and then that much smaller proportion of things that we'd actually shipped off for either grass or trash remediation. We have a range of response time too. Once we do dispatch to our contractor for trash cleanup, we could dispatch with an emergency notification if it looks like something supremely hazardous, but typically they're on about a few day turnaround time for getting out there to take something, to take care of a situation. Currently, Eric's Refuse is our cleanup contractor. We do have a set contract which lays out a minimum time and cubic yardage per call. Additional yardage is approved ahead of time by our staff. If contractor needs that additional authorization, they are to call us for us to sign off on that. When we do send them out, they are asked to clean up all things that are construed as trash from a site that can be accessed. Some exceptions, typically, we're not going to clean up yard machinery. We're not going to take a lawnmower. We'd actually prefer you have that lawnmower out in your yard so you can use it. So some of those things we do leave behind, but typically we would clean an entire site. Some site cleanup can be really challenging. Yard waste actually takes us an awful lot of time. We can't just drive to a dump and unload it. Quite often these places require things to be chipped, which requires us to haul maybe branches to a different site, chip them, and then take them to the landfill. Also takes up a lot of space too. I mean, a branch is going to fill up quite an amount of cubic yardage before we get it chipped down. Debris can sometimes too be widespread. It can be dangerous. Also, some property owners can be challenging. We've had a number of contentious situations that we've faced. Some where we've even had to involve LPD also out there as part of a cleanup. We are not inexpensive. There is a $265 administrative fee tied on to every trash cleanup, in addition to trash removal fees beyond that. That is all passed on to the landowner.
Okay,
We're not.
I'm going to stop you right there. I'm going to turn to the city attorney. And when we determine an administrative fee, we have to make sure that the amount that is projected for that, we can actually account for with salaries and benefits and equipment and all of those things. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's it's just not salary either. There's an indirect cost. There's overhead. So the expenditures or the expense of the city and the cost of the city in enforcing or setting a fee for enforcement or licensing has to be supported by actual costs. Otherwise, it would be characterized as a tax, an impermissible tax.
And that's something that you review on a regular basis or yearly when you bring that to us. Is that correct?
I believe this fee has been this fee for a number of years. I think it predates me. I would tell you, I think it's actually probably pretty low. Once I describe the amount of contact that we have with a person, the amount of effort that goes into cleaning an unremediated trash site, it's probably pretty darn low. So I have not reviewed this expense. It has been what it has, and I don't recall when this fee became $265. It was prior to my arrival.
Councilmember Spitzley.
Thank you, Madam President. Yeah, I would think that that's probably something that needs to be reviewed. I can't imagine that, you know, it costs such a little amount. The other thing, there's a couple things. You know, we always, when I was on general services, we would always get folks who come in and, you know, trash is in, or art, as with art, is in the eye of the beholder, right? And so you have some folks who claim, you know, that trash was taken, which was usable material or valuable material. I mean, what kind of judgment is made when someone gets there? Once a complaint's made and you verify a complaint and they have to go back, they just do a complete removal of trash, absent some of the stuff that you mentioned, like a lawnmower or whatever. And to that end, you know, how often do we bid out for the contracts for this?
So last time we bid out was a couple years ago. We had one response. This is sort of a double-edged sword where we're kind of fortunate that we're actually dealing with rates that were set several years ago. We have started exploring, just from probably a best practices standpoint, of what do other municipalities of similar size and setup use. We found that others have used their own public services department. We're looking for others that have engaged contractors. We'd like to figure out, you know, are we on the ballpark? But it's been difficult information to obtain. I pointed out that this is difficult work because I think it's difficult enough that that's what does lower our number of bidders. The fact that we got one is probably somewhat indicative of just the level of work. It's not easy. It can be challenging when somebody shows up and is attacking you for doing your job. I mean, this is quite oftentimes junk. To answer your question about art, we don't see that quite as often. I think junk is pretty much, but I did want to note, Councilwoman, that there is an appeals process. So should anybody want to dispute something, they can call us. I mean, we are not completely inflexible. Like I said, we want to work with an owner to remediate a situation. There is an appeals process, though.
And I know that, you know, being on general services, I get that, and I know that there's an appeals process, and I appreciate what you do. It's not really as much of a criticism, but a question, because the appeals process, once you do the appeals process, the trash or the valuable item, it's gone. And so what's the, you know, the only thing you're appealing at that point is the amount of the
And if I may,
disposal.
there actually is a pre-appeals process.
Oh,
So if
is
somebody wanted to appeal a decision that we made, there actually is a process. It's not one that's frequently asked about or made use of, but there is an option for folks prior to trash being hauled away. Because yes, you're right. When they come to you all, it's because there's a giant bill, but there are remedies prior to that.
So please enlighten me on that process.
I can provide you with additional information on all that. I think you all might
appreciate
be
that. Thank
interested in that. Yep. And like I said, it's not one that we've actually, we don't go there that often. It's not something that typically gets requested.
Councilmember Hussein.
I think you actually answered the majority of my questions. I also wanted to know in terms of refuse and grass, how often we are, putting those contracts out for bid and what type of response we're getting. Moving forward, I've sat on general service as well, and we get, a number of complaints about our contractors. It'd be interesting at some point, obviously we're not getting the response. We put these out, for bid, that's one thing, but if we could in some way split the contract, maybe have two different contractors actually doing the refuse as an example, so we could kind of, calibrate against one another and, who seems to be more efficient, who are receiving less complaints on, et cetera. And I think, to be honest with you, I think under the Hollister administration, I think they did that. And so I think it'd be worth exploring.
Councilmember Washington.
Thank you, Madam President. Brian, I get it. I see people when they come into general services, how angry they are, so I can't even imagine being the person on site removing some of this stuff. And I think your code officers and your promise officers are doing a really good job. But I do want to reiterate that in general services this year, we did ask about the bidding of the contract, and we were told by Scott Sanford that there was only one bid, so there wasn't really a lot of competition or anywhere else to go. So did I understand you correctly in saying that you may be exploring having public service actually do the pickup, or did I hear wrong?
No, I'm sorry. That was not what I was conveying. There are other communities that use their public services equivalent. I think ours did years ago. I don't recall what the decision was I wasn't involved in the decision to move out, but currently, right, there was one bidder on this current contract. I am interested in perhaps opening that bidding again, but like I said, in the meantime, we're exploring to see what other communities do, who they use, and what the pricing is. If we're comparable, maybe we don't do that, but I'm curious for those numbers prior to making a decision to open up bidding. Yeah.
Councilmember Garza.
Thank you, Madam President. And I understand about air refuse, but now what about the grass contractor? Is it Tomlinson, or am I saying it wrong?
Yes, and yes. Yeah.
Okay. So, from my understanding, last summer, they were backed up quite a bit. Is there any reason why we can't have another one to do it? So when we get the heavy rain and there's a lot of trash or a lot of grass, we could have another one, so we're not waiting more than a 10-day period for them to actually go and actually cut the grass.
Sure, and I don't believe we were backed up quite that far. I think they were pretty much on with grass mowing this year. But again, to speak to grass, in fact, we had a complaint the other day about grass, and somebody was upset about the the 7-day window that's been established. Typically, if we get, when we're getting a grass complaint, that grass is already pretty darn long. By the time we notice it, it's maybe another foot taller, and and then a couple extra days, it's going to be taller still. So. Grass grows quickly when it's raining. I think folks are getting it to it pretty quickly. I think sometimes the impression is that we don't, because it's usually probably been like 2 weeks plus when we're finally at that notification point where we can take action. But to your other point, could we have multiple bidders? I can't officially speak to that. I don't know why not. I don't know if there's something that would prohibit that, but it's certainly something we could explore if allowed.
So I guess just to follow up, please. So we have 7 days. The residents have 7 days, and then the contractor has an additional 10 days to follow up. Correct?
I don't quote me on that. I don't know. I don't think it's 10 days. I think we do have some window of time for their response, but I don't have that information
Okay,
right
I
now.
believe it is 10 days, and what I'm getting at, I guess if we had another contractor out there, you know, let's say Thomason says, well, shoot, it's gonna be a week before I get to it, this other contractor might be able to get to it, you know, day one.
Sure.
So, and that will definitely help out the situation, so, thank you.
I think one of the things that we hear quite often with the trash is when our contractor comes out, and again, that people believe that there's a value to what's ever out there. It could be the fact that they've put their appliances out there. It could be the fact that they've been remodeling in their house, and instead of storing the stuff in their house, they've got it stored outside, and those things are gone. Are taken. Some of the complaints that we've heard are, how do we know that the contractor took them to the dump? How do we know that they're not reselling them? How can I get them back? Can you answer any of those?
Sure. In terms of the getting them back, I mean, we've had people that have, you know, called us immediately. Of course, you know, we didn't hear from them, you know, earlier on any of the letters we'd sent, but the moment the things leave, they call. So sometimes we have been able to divert things on their way to the dump site. You know, if we can arrange that, we are. It leads to a conversation about storage and how perhaps maybe a washer shouldn't be sitting in your driveway, or those things. In terms of the reselling, I mean, our belief is that everything is being hauled away to a dump. You know, 90% of this stuff is stuff that's been sitting outside, trash, heaps of trash. Again, I wish I had the photos, but we do hear that occasionally. But by and large, I mean, we're looking at debris. We found things just lying in yards. I've been told things have been valuable, you know, grow materials or whatnot, but we've, you know, when they're laying sprawled around the lawn, I can't imagine they have much value at that time.
Okay. All right, go ahead.
Sure, just a couple things. I'm rounding the bend, coming into home. Just in conclusion, just wanted to let you know that I think our staff is doing a fabulous job, and so thank you for sharing that. I let them know all the time. This is difficult work, and you know, coming into this job, I guess I hadn't even thought that trash could be so complicated. Here we are. Many times I do see our staff acting more like social workers than perhaps somebody tasked with something less. We've come across horrible cases that have involved children or animals or you know, situations with the refugee population or what have you. So as such, I've definitely realized that our folks are very talented, and in building their skill sets up to deal with some of these more challenging, heartbreaking situations, we've been doing a lot of training. And so we've had animal control come in for staff meetings. We've had LPD and LFD and HRCS, the new police social worker. We've had folks come in to talk about all the situations that people in the community are facing and how can we be connecting people to resources. I mean, it's one thing to clean up the trash, but you know, if we're not able to maybe connect somebody to a resource or think about their well-being, I think that our job's not necessarily finished, because these situations could just repeat themselves, and or we don't want them going to another house in the community and just perpetuating. So most recently too, and this was beyond just my code staff, but my code staff and everyone through EPD went through a 3-hour block of active listening training. It was really important for me to, as we move in these directions of listening to our citizens and providing better customer service, knowing that we deal with a lot of situations that perhaps involve de-escalation or just understanding or providing empathy, it was really important for me to put everybody through that training. So within the last 2 weeks, all of our staff went through that training, and I think we'll be seeing those results forthcoming. That being said, I know we've had a lot of discussion and questions. I'm happy to take any last-minute ones.
You know, some of the things that we've heard, again, as part of general services or when we received calls from constituents, is my neighbor's is worse than mine. How come they didn't get cited? Or tell me who turned me in. You're telling me these are complaint-based. Tell me who turned me in. Can you address a couple of those items?
Oh, absolutely. We're trying, of course, for a fair approach. And, you know, if we wind up getting dispatched to a street on a complaint, we're probably going to visit the entire street. Part of my thoughts, my goals are at some point being able to demonstrate that we are routinely on every street in Lansing. I don't have that capability right now. Like I said, let me get fully staffed and look at the tools we have for that. But we're not playing favorites. We're not trying to treat anybody differently. I don't know if it's an owner-occupied home or a rental home when I go by. I don't know if it's somebody who's new to town or been living here forever. We're trying to treat it fairly. And so if we see a situation that's going to cause alarm, we're going to write it up.
Councilmember Spitzley.
Thank you, Madam President. I also want to make sure that if someone does complain, that is anonymous. I mean, no one wants to have backlash from their neighbors or whomever else. And so I appreciate that you're saying you go through the neighborhood, because I think it's also important that, whoever is complaining remains anonymous to the extent you can do that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I will tell you, sometimes a homeowner can surmise who a complaint may have come from. They might be on a small street. There might be somebody who has access or vantage of their backyard, and it's pretty obvious. But no, we are not sharing information. Yeah.
Okay. So I think to sort of put a bow on this, if people have complaints over the way they believe that they have been treated by code compliance, and they do not feel comfortable enough or felt that they weren't being heard by your code manager, Mr. Sanford, where can they go?
Those can come my way. Of course, those can come your way. I feel like we're all in this together. They can come to the mayor's office, to the citizen advocate. Again, my thought here is we're all in this together. So if they're not comfortable sharing that with their code officer, with somebody who may have written it up, and they don't want to go to Scott and they don't want to come to me, it can certainly move its way up. But we do take these seriously. I know we're not going to make everybody happy. It's the nature of what this is. But certainly if we've done something inappropriate or wrong, we would be willing to explore that.
Well, I would encourage people first to talk with you, because we don't have the pictures, we don't have the information, we don't have access to the code officer to follow those things back up. So before they come our way, I would hope that they have at least stopped and worked through you first to determine those issues.
Absolutely, Madam President. And I've been throughout the city on both sides of the fence. I've been out to visit sites on behalf of perhaps an owner, and I've been out on behalf of somebody who's a neighbor who's wondering why something can't be done. So I'm happy to follow up on those as they come forth.
Councilmember Washington.
Thank you, Madam President. I just want to say for us and for the public out there that I have referred many things back to Mr. McGrain, and he has always been very responsive in getting back with the citizen. So if you do get those, I personally send them right back to Brian McGrain.
Are there any more questions on code compliance for Mr. McGrain? We had a request that you come back and maybe have LEAP with you. If you could look at your calendar and see whether August 26th, Committee of a Whole might be one that would work for you. That's a council meeting that night as well. If you could take a look at that, we would appreciate it.
Might I ask for your permission to defer that into September and to work with Ms. Boak to schedule that?
Yes.
Because I think absolutely I'd love to have LEAP there, and I'd love for us to be able to put some time into putting together the right presentation for you all.
All right. So if we could look possibly for that first meeting in September. Okay. Anything else? Okay, that takes us on to our next agenda item, which is the Chief Strategy Officer ordinance. Mr. City Attorney, as you were not at the Committee of a Whole when we had this discussion, when it was before us before, a number of us were quite concerned about the fact that we had a portion added to the ordinance that talked about reporting to council. We realize that we can't order, but I think one of the things that we had talked about during this whole budget process was that we wanted to make sure that the Chief Strategy Officer was giving us reports in a timely fashion. And so what we have before us now and before council members is a draft 5. And if you were to look at C, we do have a reporting section that's back in. It's on page 2, lines 1 through 3. And it says, reporting, the Chief Strategy Officer is requested to report on a regular basis to City Council regarding the analysis and findings of the work performed. Would you like to elaborate on that?
You are correct in stating that under the charter, the city council has the ability to request information at any time. The language that was originally in there, I think had the word direct or something along those lines, and it was really open to interpretation as to whether or not it was just the expression of the desire of council to see it or whether it was a direct order. So the substitution of language requested to report, similar to the language that you have seen in your recent city council budget policies about requesting the report. So that this expresses the intention that the Chief Strategy Officer will come back to you on a regular basis to give an analysis of the findings and the work performed.
Well,
That's
before-
basically what that C says.
Before I call on Councilmember Spitzley, I would hate to use our budget policies as an example of reporting. Since I've been on council over the years, we have requested numerous reports, and Mr. Tate's looking at me, not from this administration so far, but from previous administrations, that it went on deaf ears and we never received anything. So, part of the whole reason that we, when we talked about this and when we were trying to figure out where the money was going to rest and who was going to be responsible, part of it was the fact that we wanted to make sure that we were receiving reports. And I guess the way I interpret this is requested, but if somebody wants to turn their nose up, it doesn't necessarily mean we're going to get anything.
That's correct. You could rephrase this, well, it's the charter was written that way. I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
So this could be
Well, if-
rewritten to say that it is.
Okay,
it is-
if we can wait just one moment, I need to get something from the office, and I'll be
Okay.
right back.
It's never good when she's like, hold on, let's go to the office. It's never, it's never a good thing. It's like taking off your earrings.
Okay. If you could go to the charter and look up section 7-110, control of expenditures. It says here that the Director of Finance shall submit to council, and to the mayor and council, data showing the relationship between the estimated and actual revenues and expenditures to date. What we're dealing with, a chief strategy officer is looking at expenses and revenues as part of that responsibility as well. Now, this one says shall submit, and council is one of those.
This section of 71110 is really written in connection with the Uniform Budgeting Act, which deals with the actual expenditure of money That is, you appropriate money and then you authorize expenditures. So it's governed by state statute as opposed to the strategy officer who is recommending a plan for the saving of money. It's not, there's no control in the chief strategy officer to actually manage the accounts of the city, manage the budget, manage any appropriations, and bring recommendations for the transfer of funds. I don't know.
Okay. Councilmember Spitzley.
Thank you, Madam President. I think we got a little bit too much in the weeds, because the intent, Madam President, if I may, is that there's already provided in the charter, language that a department director or whomever shall provide a report to council. So when someone says that this is something that that isn't provided for or beyond the scope of the city council, I think Madam President has showed you a section in the charter where there's a department head that may not have been, that is under the purview of the mayor, shall provide a report to council. So, the fact that there's this pushback from whomever that, we don't have there's not that authority to provide a report or reporting to council. They shall not provide a report to council. I think the example there is there's already language there. But I want to even get back to the number C. This whole thing on a regular basis, the city council regarding analysis, finding, work performed. I also want and recommendations. I know work performed may be recommendations, but I would like, they're supposed to be providing recommendations. And the agreement that was made, at least, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but when we had this discussion, the intent in the agreement was that this was going to be a position that, would provide these recommendations, and that council would have the opportunity to review these recommendations as well. And so now, when we get all this done, now it's, council doesn't really have the authority. We don't, they can't, we can't require this position to submit us the reports. And it's troubling to me. I think, that was the intent. And so I think we need to look at this section in the charter and other ways to fulfill some of the commitments that were made. And one of the commitments was that this position would report both to council and the mayor's office. Thank you.
Yes.
I mean, yes, I don't intend that this turn into a legal argument. So you've got the general provision in the charter that specifically says no direct orders, and you have a specific one that, explained it has to do with money, and that is more specific, which would overrule the general. Perhaps if you look at C, it could be rephrased to say that it is the intent of it is the intent of council to receive a report on a quarterly basis regarding analysis of findings, work performed, and any recommendations. Does that assist at all?
And you're going to guarantee me I'm going to get it?
Well, you have a charter provision that says if you request information.
Oh, well,
I mean,
yeah, if I got all the information I requested, I wouldn't have an office.
I mean, it's
Because,
pretty specific. You shall receive a response in return for it. That's in the charter.
Okay. Councilmember Washington.
Thank you, Madam President. It was the intent of the financial health team when we discussed this position with them that this position would report to both council and the administration for the checks and balance purpose. But since we were told this could not happen, that this person must report to the mayor, then it was the intent that this individual would report back to council on a very regular basis. We cannot, we cannot be responsible, we cannot be thorough, we cannot be good in our job when we pass the budget if we do not know what the recommendations of this strategy officer is. It's all well and good that they let the executive branch know what the recommendations are, but at the end of it all, we are responsible for the budget. And if we don't know what the recommendations are, we cannot responsibly pass a budget. We cannot vet a budget. I think we have to find a way that is not saying, pretty please, will you let us know something? I think this is a very serious position for a very serious reason. And we just have to find a way to make sure that this happens.
And maybe part of the ordinance could include the section of the charter that talked about the fact that when we request information, we shall have it provided.
Yep, we can do that. Yes, we can do that.
Because then it spells it out. So that if we didn't get the information, then they're in violation of the charter.
That's what the charter says, you shall receive information after you request it. It's,
Okay. And then the
it's
city
in
attorney
section
will take them.
3-207.
And then the city attorney will take them to court.
We'd have to review all the facts of every circumstance to determine whether or not we would.
Councilmember Spitzley.
Thank you, Madam President. But, the point was that, I know that we have that right to ask for that information. The point was, we weren't, to not have to get into such a confrontational or combative type of process. And by, specifically laying it out, then it protects both sides. It protects the administration and it protects the council. So that if there's any ambiguity or if there's any disagreement, the language is clear that the financial health team, the chief strategy officer, shall provide this information to council as well. And so I get what our authority is under the city charter, and that we're, that we can ask this information. I get that. But, the intent is that we shouldn't have to. We should be working in a collaborative way so that we're moving this city forward and we're addressing, our financial responsibilities. And so, again, to the extent that we can find a way to make sure, short of suing, the mayor's office or challenging the mayor's office in court, I think we need to find that. I don't think we should set up, from the get-go, a combative type of process. And so, yeah, I want to find a way where we make sure that we get this stuff. I think the mayor is fine, and I think he will, to the extent he can, try to fulfill his responsibilities. But, this is something that is important, and it is important to me, it's important to the city, and so I want to make sure that we're doing it right.
So just to clarify your comments, do you have any problem with that provision being added into the ordinance?
No, let me take this back and rewrite this to see
Okay.
if I can come up with middle ground on this.
Okay. Councilmember Spitzley, did you have any problem with that being added in?
I think it's redundant.
But it makes a statement.
Okay.
Vice President Spatafor? Councilmember Washington?
Just for anybody that's watching this, I want it to be really clear. We are not saying that Mayor Shore will try to hide information from us. Has nothing to do with this administration, really, or with this council. We could have a new mayor in 2 years. This council will see changes over the years. So just so if anybody is out there, do not make the mistake of thinking that this body is in any way, shape, or form saying that Mayor Shore would hide anything from us. But we have to make sure that the language is clear for people that come after us and come after this mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll have this on the next committee of the whole. And what we'd need to do, if we approve that on the 12th, then we would be setting the public hearing for it.
Same night?
Yeah. Yeah. Because then we wouldn't have the public hearing until the 26th, yeah. Okay. All right, I think that takes care of everything that we had on the agenda tonight. And just want to remind the public that tomorrow is Neighborhood Night Out. So check to see if in your community there is going to be a neighborhood party that might be going on, and get a chance to get out and get to know your neighbors. And we will see you back here on August 12th. With that, we are adjourned. Thank you.